This is WDET, FM 101.9, Detroit Public Radio. The program is Detroit Today. I'm Craig Fahle. Thanks so much for being with us today. And we're very pleased to have with us today Julie Rosier, a community activist living at the Boggs Center. She's here to discuss the screening of a new film, Citizen King. And Julie, I first of all, welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
In Citizen King, I want to talk a little bit about this film because you suggest that it pushes past the myths that have obscured King's story. What myths are you referring to?
Specifically the 1963 I Have a Dream speech. That point of his life oftentimes gets glorified, but the time when he was doing more questioning, especially around the Vietnam War later in his life, closer to assassination, often gets overlooked.
And it is interesting because it's almost as if he gave that speech, and that was pretty much the end of his work.
Exactly.
And I think in a lot of people's minds, especially what we're being taught in schools, what's being shown during Black History Month, why do you think that's the case? That this is sort of put as the high point, and nothing that happened afterwards is ever discussed?
I think the questions that he was raising later in life really threatened the status, the power structure of the time, and made people question things in a way that would have them make fundamental changes in their own lives. And in order to keep people from looking at those things and making serious changes, the power structure enforces unified the visions that come across in his I Have a Dream speech.
And not to minimize the importance of that speech, because,
right.
Again, the message that came out in that speech is one that we all should aspire to in this country. But, again, there is this sense that as he aged, as he started taking a more serious look at what was going on, especially in America's cities here in the North, and what was going on in the ghettos of these cities, he struck a more activist pose, a radical activist pose almost.
Yes, exactly. The I Have a Dream speech would almost tell you that his work was over, that he accomplished something and nothing left was to do. But in Detroit City of Hope, we're recognizing that he was calling especially the northern cities, to take action and to embrace hope and transform their situation.
And at the same time, he was striking that tone. He was alienating not just a lot of the white political leaders that had been with him to that point, but he was also going against a lot of the influential black leadership at the time, was he not?
Yes, he was. And it produced a lot of tension between those colleagues right around him in his inner circle. And those were hard times for him towards the end of his life.
I want to talk a little bit about Coretta Scott King, and we have a clip here that I want to play from her right now. And she really suggests that he was going through a lot of personal things at this time, trying to figure out exactly where he wanted to go, what he thought his next step should be. So I want to listen to this real quick.
Okay.
I remember Easter of 1963 when my husband was jailed in Birmingham. I had just had my fourth child and was still confined to my house. And he had gone to jail on Good Friday. And I was very depressed. But somehow that was the most meaningful Easter that I have ever experienced because Easter is a time of suffering, but it's creative, if it can be creative suffering. And I think if we think in terms of my husband's life and his death in those terms, then we will not be as sad. We will be hopeful because in his death, there is hope for redemption.
When you hear her talking about this, what are you thinking when you listen to Coretta Scott King, and why this part of his life, again, has been just sort of not talked about? Because, again, this is a man sort of in conflict with the movement, with himself in a lot of ways, as to what the next step should be and what his true role should be. Why do you think that we're unwilling to accept that this is a man that maybe had a bit of a crisis of conscience at times?
I think the turmoil that he was going through in terms of identity is really hard to face because it asks us to look at our own identity and question it, and forces us to another level in our evolution as people. And it's hard. It's painful to look at those things and to think about what you could be instead of what you are right now. But that is what we're trying to focus in on in his message, and really look at how you use crisis and suffering to push you to a new level. For example, the crisis in leadership with the mayor right now has a lot of people feeling really disappointed. And while that downward spiral is one way to go, we're saying, what are the opportunities here for us to redefine what leadership could be?
Yeah, coming up on Saturday at 10 o'clock, you're going to be screening Citizen King, and that'll be followed by a discussion, a good 2-hour discussion about this. And you've seen it, obviously, and you've talk about the transformation people have when they learn more about him and where he was at this point in life. Because, again, we have raised this man up to be almost, this mythical figure, when in reality he was a human being. He had his failings, obviously. But do you find that when people see this film and get a chance to really talk about it, that they appreciate him more?
I do. I can speak for myself that to see his humanity and his struggle had a tremendous empowering effect on me, because I know my deepest struggles with identity and with purpose. Are my decisions the best in terms of the social movement that's coming, that I think we're seeing unleashed by Obama at this present time? And so I struggle with that, and it was great for me to see this historical figure struggle also, and it brings him down off of a pedestal in a way that encourages people to become the leaders that they want to see, as opposed to just waiting for someone on a pedestal to do everything.
Well, and that's interesting. By placing him on that pedestal, do we, in effect, discourage people from trying to take up that mantle because they don't think they can reach those kind of heights?
Yes, I believe we do. I think that it takes away from people's power and agency. It says, this man was able to do this, but you're not, because you're not on that type of pedestal for whatever reason. But it doesn't look at how he got to be there and how he had to continue to struggle with his ideas in order to really be on the front wave of what's coming next, and always questioning his role and his purpose.
I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm not positive you can answer this, but you mentioned what you see as a social change that is coming with the ascendancy of Barack Obama in the political system right now.
Yes.
Do you see a lot of parallels between 1967, 1968, and where we are right now?
I do, yes. And that's why when you mention that it's Black History Month right now, I think that's important. I also think it's important to think of February 2008 as a moment in history, and that we are creating history right now, and we are part of a movement that I believe will be extremely significant.
And what's at the root of that, do you think?
I think it's Obama saying, yes, we can. Him saying, I'm not on a pedestal necessarily. My hope is important. My hope for changing the country is important, but it's just as important for your own hope inside of you, that you can change your life.
And not just to talk about one candidate too much, because but obviously he's the one that's inspiring this kind of thought, especially amongst young people like yourself.
Yeah.
And he really is energizing a lot of folks that maybe weren't that jazzed about politics and social change beforehand, but seem to be getting there, even though a lot of his critics suggest he's not saying a whole lot other than, give me a chance, I offer at least some hope and maybe a new way of thinking. Mm-hmm. Is that enough?
I would say the tendency to think at least some hope, to minimize the power of hope, and the fact that hope allows you to imagine a vision, and that is the first step to finding identity, to establishing purpose, to follow such a vision. So I think he has tremendous power to take us away from old ways of dealing with fear and doubt, and leaving it up to leaders to do everything, and giving each individual person agency, saying, yes, you can do whatever you need to do. And you need to look at your life, really examine it. Look at the city situation that we're in right now, really examine it and say, where do we go from here? If we can be the change, what is the change? And let's become it.
Well, let's get back to the event on Saturday, because, again, at 10 o'clock, the screening of Citizen King, and followed by the discussion afterwards. But the title of this event that the Detroit City of Hope is sponsoring is Exploring Martin Luther King's Challenge to Us in Detroit. What
Yes.
was that challenge?
I think it's very similar to what Obama is asking us to do. It's challenging us to look at our own individual lives and recognize the connection between our values and our sense of what is possible, and really believing in ourselves to change ourselves and the way we interact with each other, and that in doing that, it will bring about fundamental structural change.
Well, who are you hoping? Who do you think is the ideal person that needs to see this film?
I'm hoping for community members, people coming out of, that would have a conversation here and then bring that conversation into churches, into barbershops, into the home. So just any person in Detroit who is asking themselves questions about Kwame, about Obama, about Martin Luther King at this time, to come and let's be in a room together and let's start to have a conversation about it.
Well, I'd like to remind folks that it is, again, Saturday from 10 a.m. to noon is the screening of the film, followed by a discussion from noon to 2. It'll be at the Club Technology Building. That's at 8200-30 East Forest, and that's between Maxwell and Seminole. Enter at the set of the Red Double Doors at Seminole. And for more information, contact the Boggs Center. That's at 313-923-0797. Julie Rosier, thanks so much for joining us on Detroit Today. It sounds like a neat event.
Thank you very much for having me.